Yes, sir. Allow me to introduce you uh, to our participants today. Now, Mr. Nimal Gamage is a chartered environmental professional with over 3 decades of experience in both environment and private sector. He holds a BSc in Applied Science and MPhil from the University of Sri Javardhanapura, along with a postgraduate diploma in Environmental Science from the Open University of Sri Lanka. He has served as a project director of the Pilisaru National Solid Waste Project Management Project and held senior leadership roles at the Central Environmental Authority since 2007 till the retirement in 2024, including Director of Investigations and Deputy Director General of Environment Management and Assessment. And also since 2023, he serves as a visiting lecturer at the Uva Wellassa University. His areas of expertise include environmental impact assessment, noise and vibration management, pollution control in small and medium scale enterprises, plastic waste management, ISO 14001 2015 auditing and licensing for nuclear power plants. Mr. Gamage, we are honored to have you with us. And on behalf of the Green Building Council of Sri Lanka, I warmly welcome you and invite you to begin the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to join the monthly Green Talk discussion organized by the Sri Lanka Green Building Council. Also, I must thank for the introduction for this today's discussion. Let me share the presentation. I hope that you can this alliances for sustainable industrial growth, bringing policy into practice. So in this topic, of course, I have selected national level policies to discuss, and also I in briefly discuss with you important selected environmental and industrial policies, and also I will discuss with you how these policies has been transformed into the practices and during the last 30 years. So that with regard to the sustainable industrial growth, we can identify several policy instruments at the national level. In 2003, and it is subsequently revised once in every 5 years. So that in that policy, a separate chapter has been allocated for industrial development based on the sustainable industrial development policy. And then we can identify national industrial pollution management policy statement, approved, and then we can identify another policy and strategy, that is the National Energy Policy and Strategy of Sri Lanka, that was developed in 2019. And then we can identify National Industrial Development Strategy developed by 2018 to 2025. And also we can identify certain important legal provisions in the national was amended in 1928, 1988 and 2003. And we can identify certain other policy instruments in the National Policy and Strategy for Cleaner Production developed by the Ministry of Environment in 2005. cabinet writing of industries in the vicinity of Karen River in 1993. In addition, we can identify a similar policy instrument adopted by the Ministers of Cabinet in the year 2009. So those are the basic policy instruments as well as legal provisions available in the country for the sustainable industrial growth. So in all policies, it has been taken into consideration the principle of development that meet the needs of present generation without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. That principle was introduced by Sir Brundtland in his Brundtland Commission report 92. And then policy was set in the so that since then this policy has been transformed into various legal instruments and the policy instruments of various countries at the national levels. So that based on their sustainable development policy, all these policies which I mentioned now develop. So that basic idea of all the development has allowed with minimum harm, minimum emissions, water emissions, noise emissions, and scheduled waste emissions. So that in these policies, focus has been given to management of industrial waste and how to do the industry without the way of disposing all kinds of liquid and solid waste into the environment. So thereby it tries to strike a balance between the natural resources of the country and the industrial development. But in certain other countries, in most of the cases in developing countries, they have given the priority for the industrial development and resources has been given the second priority. However, later, once development has come to a certain level of economy of that country, then they took action to clean the environment to the previous state. But in our country, the policy is to balance between the industrial development as well as. So with that, in this few policy, the first one is the National 3 by the Ministry of Environment. We can identify sustainable use of the national environment source and also enforce emission and effluent standards through environmental regulations. And also it has been given priority for industry technologies and practices. Those have to be taken action by the National Clean Production Say, by adopting cleaner production practices in the industries, it is aimed to minimize the generation and the amount of waste, that in the sense generation of volume of wastewater, generation of solid waste amount. Likewise, certain technologies are applied to minimize the generation. So the impact to the next. And then environmental, then only the industries can discharge their effluent into the environment. That has been accepted as a policy in the national environmental policy. And also certain environmental friendly technologies are also promoted through that policy instrument. And then when been given efficient use of raw materials, water process, thereby technologies are to be developed for less water consuming processes and less energy consuming processes, and also self energy sufficient industrial processes. And also the policy tries to encourage industries to adopt resource recovery and recycling. And in their resources, attention has been given to recover the waste material generated in the industries, and also directing those waste material for recycling systems. Sometimes the resource recovery and recycling systems may be available within the same industry, and also sometimes their waste will be a resource. Likewise, given attention for waste recovery and waste recycling systems as well. And the third policy instrument is the environmental impact assessment, environmental assessment. So that the strategic environment assessment is a policy level assessment, thereby all the national level policies, programs, and are assessed at the national level to identify and strategies and implement at the national. However, under that strategic environment assessment, certain areas of the country has been assessed for the strategic environment assessment. Basically, one of the very famous strategic environment assessment study is that the developed under the Utturu Vasantaya program soon after the Northern Province was released from the terrorist activities. And then a strategic plan was developed by that particular strategic environment assessment study for the Northern Province development. In the study, of course, certain areas were identified for conservation, right? So that basically the vegetative nature reserve was identified as a conservation area under that Utturu Vasantaya strategic environment assessment study. So likewise, certain studies has been conducted in the country at the policy level. Another example for the strategic environment is the Southern Province Environment Strategy by managed elephant area in Hambantota was identified under that particular strategic environment assessment study conducted for the Southern Province. So likewise, these strategic environment assessment are not directly for the project base, but it addresses at the national level on how to resources are consumed or resources are conserved it is something like a planning tool. When it comes to the environment, the impact assessments are conducted by 3 government agencies in the country: Central Environmental Authority, Coast Conservation Department and the Wildlife Conservation Department. So that basic objective of the environment impact assessment is to identify so that the identify the environment and their cost impacts are also studied under the environmental impact assessment report. And with that, of course, the developments are implemented so that the environmental impacts are identified at early stage of the planning of the project, and then they are minimized during implementation. National environmental policy, environmental impact assessment, and the strategic environment assessment has been identified as a major policy instrument for the country to ensure the sustainable industrial growth. And the fourth one is adoption of the environmental management systems. International standard organization has until of industries and some other agency of beyond the standard, so that it has become a market tool. So that in order to export your products to certain countries like European countries, you are required to obtain the ISO 14001 certification from a recognized agency. Those certifications are offered by the Sri Lanka Standard Institution and some other country. And then certain incentives are also identified in this national environmental policy, such as tax relaxations and subsidies for cleaner production technologies, and some other instruments are also released to process and identify capacity building and the national patient, integration of environment into development planning, waste management and circular economy, climate change adaptation fight under the national environmental policy adopted in so that low carbon tech under the vision and use of renewable industrial operations. Have based on the carbon footprint management as well as the water footprint management with and then when it comes to the national industrial abatement and instruments available under the National Industrial Pollution Management Policy Statement, even due consideration has been given for the pollution abatement and control, and pollution prevention at the source also has and treatment of industrial waste identified as a key policy under that industrial pollution management policy. And the clustering of pollution industry unit. That was one of the, important policy adopted under the National Industrial Pollution Management Policy. Thereby, it says that the future siting of industrial units to usually design industry estate parks and zones. So that as a policy instrument, country has identified polluting area located within specially designed industrial estate where the pollution management technologies are available and they are managed centrally, not by the individual industrial units. So that there are so many examples for that in the states. Some other industrial estate within the country have been designed for, however, the as a managed center in the board of industries, board of investment are taken taken care about the wastewater management. Then wastewater treatment and all the other solid waste even are centrally collected and disposed of centrally by the estate management entity. So likewise, there are so many such industrial estates, thereby facilities has been given for the industries, the material generated industries. That has been identified as a policy national. When it comes to the governance and compliance of that particular industrial policy statement, it has been identified that industry discharging wastewater into central treatment plants will be required to be less stringent standard prescribed for the direct discharge into the environment by the national environmental level. The discharge standards are very less if you are going to discharge into the central wastewater treatment system operated by the state management entity. So that by having such an facility within industrial estates, industries further aim to be set up within industrial estate rather than going in location in the country. And then management of wastewater and the treatment and disposal has been taken care by the industrial waste management entity. However, the government of Sri Lanka intends to making industries responsible for monitoring and regulating its emission authority of CEA. So that in that sense, policy identifies that the monitoring of discharge material, the quality of wastewater, air quality, and the air quality of boilers and some other emissions are to be monitored by the industry itself, and reports are to be submitted to the regulatory bodies like Central Environment Authority, Board of Investment of Sri Lanka. Regulatory body. It also has been identified as a policy instrument in this industrial policy mentioned at the beginning of this. Similar policies identify that there should be certain waste and promote beyond the prescribed standard, and has been created in the Western countries and some other countries for the productions which are produced under that particular self-monitoring standards like ISO 40,000. And then when it comes to national environment impact assessment process, as I mentioned earlier, not all the entrepreneurs are required to go for the environment impact assessment procedure, but certain environment impact assessment procedure, Central Environment Authority, and the assessment process chemicals, pesticides, storage, in environment environmental authority recommend the new industrial enterprise uh, who are going to set up their industries at a very small scale, so that the large scale or national level project to go for the environment impact assessment process and get the approval from the Central Environment Authority or the Coast Conservation Department or the Wildlife Conservation Department. But the other industries which are capacity is very less, so that they are required to obtain a separate environmental recommendation from the Central Environmental Authority to set up their industries within that particular plots of lands. And in addition, of course, there's another cabinet to the vicinity calendar. If it be set up within the vicinity of calendar, a separate process has been adopted by the ministers of cabinet in so that the importance of that calendar river basin is that the intake water Colombo and suburb area is extracted from Calendar River at Ambatale intake as well as in the in somewhere in Pattivilla in Calendar River, so that there are several water intake points of the operated by the National Water Supply and Drainage Board to extract raw water to treat to that potable standards and distribute to the Colombo and suburb areas. So that in order to protect the raw water quality of the Callan River, decision has been by the of ministers in 93. So thereby this policy control the charge of effluent into the calendar. Even now there are many industry calendar which are discharging wastewater in river, so that this policy to control the location of such high polluting industries within the current river, because that carrying capacity of the current river is used by currently available high polluting industries, so that the further accumulation of high polluting in the current river has been controlled by this policy instrument adopted by the ministers of cabinet. So that in according to that policy instrument, most sensitive areas have been identified within the Karen River. So that certain divisional secretariat areas which are border the Karen River has been identified as more sensitive areas, and the other areas in the vicinity of Karen River has been identified as uh, divisional secretary areas like Kaduwela, Sitawaka, Kolava, and some other areas within the Karen River has identified sensitive areas, and some other areas are sensitive. Within the more sense, this decision has discouraged setting up high polluting industries. And also in the sensitive areas, the policy tries to allocate some high polluting industries, but with stringent conditions. And in order to give effect to this policy instrument, a committee has been appointed by the cabinet. That committee is led by the Central Environmental Authority. The other members of that is the National Water Supply and Drainage Board, Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, and some other government bodies like Ministry of Industries. And thereby that committee decides based on that policy instrument and what actual project sensitive most areas have sensitive areas within the current river basin. So thereby two lists has been identified by that particular policy instrument. That policy instrument industries has been identified, and type B industries also has been identified. In most are not allocated, not they will consider only the type B. So likewise, very hazardous industries are not allowed in the in particular policy decision DLT 90 respect to the calendar year. In 2009 also, there's another similar policy decision by the cabinet to further discourage high policies within the other river basins as well, within other upstream the water intake points of the national water, so that thereby they tries to protect the water quality of river basins and industrial discharges to that particular water intake points of the water supply and drainage board. So, however, that while those stringent conditions are applied for the industrial development, on the other hand, Ministry of Industries, Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, and Industrial Development are trying to facilitate having industrial estate in the country, and also to give effect to the industrial uh, developed by the Ministry of Industries. Same policies are available, policy even. So that this map shows the industry estate developed by the Ministry of Industries, Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, and Industrial Development Board, and some other agencies. So that most of these industrial parks are in operation, so that within the industrial parks, the entrepreneurs have the opportunity to, develop their facilities with less sample with their wastewater only up to the treatment standards. And then they can discharge noise levels up to 20 decibels, and during night time they can discharge noise levels decibels, so that they have to get the industrial facilities round up. And then in addition, of course, there's another legal instrument under the National Environment Law in order to protect the environment from the pollution. That is in certain industries, once they commence their operation, they are required to obtain the environment from the central environment. The idea of having such a license emissions into the environment does not into the environment. Entrepreneur and some other ways, air emissions, noise, and ways like into the environment, but up to states to treat their waste material up to a standard only their waste material into the under the environmental protection license. That license being implementing and during last several documented within the country, thereby most of the industrial entrepreneurs are encouraged to effluent prior to discharge into the environment. And in addition, of course, there are certain other regulation published under the National Environment Act in order to emissions like noise, effluent, solid waste, and some other air emissions, things like that, and also to control the open and burning of refuse and vehicle emission standards, and a lot of standards has been published under the National Environment in order to, have this for waste and disposal. So, like the wastewater discharge standards into inland surface water, those are very stringent standards. Thereby, you can see that the BOD level particular standard is by COD level is 250. In case of industrial estates, they are very relaxed. And this slide presents you the standards into the common waste facilities within industrial estates. That is 400 milligram per liter in case of BOD, and COD it is 800, whereas if you are wastewater by your own waste gram of milligram per liter with same demand. So likewise, I identify which are in industry. And then there are certain, though how those consumers form into the and some other standards, and so uh, pollution management within the has been ensured by instruments adopted by industries, uh, Ministry of Environment, and some other governments time to time. So that in addition, of course, there will be certain other new policies. Those will uh, transform into the regulators under in near future. Those instruments will be the polluter pays principle for incentivize the discharge of wastewater. and extended use principle single plastic can promote plastic recycling, pay value of environmental three policy legal in the new so polluter pays principle discharge of wastewater. So at the with the present standards, wastewater can be discharged any of the from any of the industry if those wastewaters are meeting that particular standard. For example, one company discharge 10 cubic meters of wastewater into the environment, 250 BOD level is 30. But whereas at the same time, another company can discharge meters of wastewater into the environment and with the same standard like 30 BOD. But difference, the so that small discharges relief of small load of pollution into the volume discharges. I mean, discrepancy between those the discharge loads into the environment, but the fee for environment license are same. They are required only to obtain the EPL and but by having that polluter pays principle be the discharge fee scheme, so thereby concern multiplied by the and then you will get the waste and the charges will be made based on that revenue waste sort of standards, but also volume volume both will for calculation of waste load will be entrepreneurs. Charging scheme, entrepreneurs will be further encouraged to minimize sort of volume modern technology. The improved, whereas pollution load release environment will be less. So and then what is we can promote plastic industry. That also based on the so polluter once the into the environment bottle discharging into the environment has become a, issue taken into consideration by various parties, even the general public, so that by having such an extended producer principle as a legal provision, National Environment Act, it tries to be responsible the uh, entrepreneur producing products and packing those products in PET bottles and that PET bottles are into the environment that particularly are for collecting the bottle and this the extended producer extended producer responsible. So that at present, of course, there's no required, but certain entrepreneurs are trying empty PET bottles for market schemes. But once that particular extended responsibility principle is came into legal provisions and the regulation, all the entrepreneurs who are using bottles for storing are required to collect the empty bottle from the environment once the consumer is bottles into the environment and responsible manner. Because that that the Sri Lanka has been identified as in so that the once those are released into the environment, those will end up in the ocean. I mean that the coastal ecosystem will be further degraded such plastic materials, and then those plastic material again generate microplastics, and there are scientific microplastics in certain animals and also our food items like salt. And in order to address that is kind of extended producer has been under the disc be included into the legal provisions. And lastly, the pay the value of the environmental damage. In the future, there will be certain provisions to calculate the environmental damage caused responsible industries who are discharging into the environment. There will be a system of damage that calculating that environmental damage cost and legal costs from the these legal policy to manage the community in a responsible manner while environment and the natural resources. Sustainability of the industries will be further achieved. This kind of policy instruments forming those policy instruments into the legal provisions and the regulations and enforcing them in an effective way to, further protect the environmental quality and also to save the future. So, those are the to share with you, and I hope that I uh, give you some points to think in industrial policy transform into the uh, with that, of course, I conclude my presentation. If there's any, of course, I spare a few minutes with you.
Thank you, Mr. Nimal Gamage, for sharing your insightful presentation and sharing your valuable expertise with us. We will now open the floor for Q&A session. To ask questions, you can use the raise hand feature, and then we will unmute you to ask questions directly. And you are also welcome to use the chat to share your questions and comments. We will aim to address as many as questions as possible with the time.
I don't see any questions in the chat box. If the audience has any clarification, of course, I can. Since there are no questions, of course, I think we can wind up the session now. So I will hand over the forum to the green building.
I hope today's session provided you with meaningful insights into environmental regulations, standards, and practical applications in the field. As we conclude, join me to express our sincere appreciation to Mr. Nimal Gamage. On behalf of the Green Building Council of Sri Lanka and all participants, I extend our sincere gratitude for sharing your time and expertise knowledge. To our audience, thank you for your participation, and your curiosity and enthusiasm make Green Talks a valuable platform for learning and exchange. We will share the PPT in the future with you all, and if you have questions, please forward them to Green Building Council. And we are looking forward to welcome you to our next Green Talk sessions as we continue our shared mission towards sustainability and environmental responsibilities. For more information about our initiatives and services, please feel free to contact us via email or mobile number displayed on the screen. Until then, stay safe, stay inspired, and let's continue building a greener, more resilient future together. Good night, and thank you once again.